Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Annual General Meeting. I'd like to remind you that this meeting is being recorded, so if you would prefer not to have your image recorded, please turn off your video. So, my name is Paul Errol, and I am the chair of the BUC Executive Council. This is the very first AGM ever to be held electronically by Zoom. But then this past year has been one of firsts. And although we are nearing the 1-year mark of COVID-19, this is not the first time our congregation has weathered a pandemic. From 1918 to 1920, the Spanish flu swept the world, killing some 20 to 50 million people. The Spanish flu arrived in Bracebridge in October of 1918, and the first thing the Board of Health did was to close the churches, the schools, the library, theater, and all public buildings. The folks you see on screen would have known many who were sickened, as there were some 400 cases in town. The equivalent today would be if we suddenly had 2,700 cases in town. Even a local hotel, the British Lion Hotel, had to be converted into an emergency hospital. However, the town and our little congregation survived and soldiered on, as will we. And on that note, I would ask Reverend Nancy Knox to offer an opening prayer.
Thank you, Paul. Let us pray. God of all seasons and ages, God of all times, we gather for our annual meeting in this most unusual way. We ask for your blessing as we move into this time of conversation. We pray for your guidance in our meeting, that your Holy Spirit might open our hearts to one another. As we see familiar faces come onto the screen, may we hold our church community, our faith community, in kindness and compassion. Give us wisdom, O God, and attentiveness and sound judgment in our decision-making. Keep us faithful for your presence and thankful for the many blessings that do come to our life, even when we are in the midst of difficulty. We ask this for the sake of your glory and in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Nancy. I will now review the meeting and voting procedures. If you're experiencing audio difficulties, turn your video feed off to improve the quality of the audio. You'll still be able to see and hear everything. To ask questions during the meeting, use the raise hand icon. This is found by clicking on the reactions icon on the toolbar. Now, if you have an older version of Zoom, click on the participants icon. Raise hand will be at the bottom of the window that opens. On an iPad, tap on the 3 dots labeled More at the top right of the screen to find raise hand. The dots may be at the bottom of the screen on a smartphone. On some smartphones, raise hand is found by tapping participants. Telephone participants raise hand by pressing *9. This will be used to vote as well as to ask a question. Voting will take place using pop-up polls. The poll will accommodate 2 participants per device. For additional participants on one device, a vote can be cast by sending it in chat to Lloyd Dunham. Instructions for that will follow. Please be sure that your device names everyone who is present on it. And remember to mute your mic to speak and mute your mic after you have spoken. The mute button can be found on the Zoom toolbar. For phone users, press *6 to toggle the mute button on and off. Sometimes the Zoom toolbar disappears. To find it again, hover the cursor over the bottom of the screen on a desktop or laptop. On an iPad, drag your finger to the top or tap the screen there until it pops up. On smartphones, drag or tap at the top or bottom wherever your toolbar appears. The voting procedure for a poll is as follows. If you have an online device, you will vote by pop-up poll, which will appear on your screen when it is launched. On a desktop or laptop, the first participant clicks on their choice for question number 1. Then the second participant clicks on their choice for question number 2. You may need to scroll down the polling window to see all of question 2. Click on Submit at the bottom when it turns blue. If you have an online device, you will vote by pop-up poll, which will appear on your screen when it is launched. I think I've read this, but on a desktop laptop, the first participant clicks on their choice for question number 1. The second participant clicks on their choice for question 2. And then, as I mentioned, you press Submit at the bottom when it turns blue. However, if you do not wish to vote on this motion, click on Abstain. And if there's only one person on your device, click on Not Applicable for the second participant, and then click Submit. On an iPad or smartphone, the first participant taps their vote, then the next button will turn blue. Tap on it to get to the second participant screen. The second participant votes on the second screen. Once the choice has been selected, tap on the Submit button to submit your vote. If there is only one person voting on this device, choose Not Applicable on the second screen and then Submit. We will now have a pop-up practice poll.
For those that can't see the practice poll, how would they know unless you read it to them?
Very good. If you cannot see the practice poll, I will read the question. Participant 1, would you like daylight savings time all year long? Yes, no, or abstain. And then you press Next to get to participant 2. If you're voting by chat or by telephone, there's a slightly different procedure, which I will read next. And for all votes, our scrutineer, Lloyd, will announce the votes having been passed.
And Paul, I think I'm going to end polling, or do you end the online polling? You can deal with the 2 telephone ones in a second.
Very good.
And the results of the poll is we have 60 that would like daylight savings time all year long, We have 23 that wouldn't, and we have 6 abstainers.
Okay, thank you. We will go on now to how to vote in chat. If there are more than 2 people on your device, more than 2, that is, the other participants will vote by sending a message in chat. Click or tap on the chat icon on the toolbar. That's the one on the right. On an iPad, chat is accessed by tapping the 3 dots at the end of the Zoom toolbar. Click or tap on the chevron to the right of the word everyone in the chat box, and then click or tap on the name Lloyd Dunham from the list that pops up. On an iPad, tap in the space under Send to Lloyd Dunham, and the keyboard will pop up. Type yes, no, or abstain in the message box, and press Enter Return on a desktop, laptop, or tap Send on an iPad. This will send your vote to Lloyd. Now, for those 2 of you who are on the telephone, you will be given an option for yes, no, or abstain. Please listen carefully to the following instructions, and I will repeat these instructions for each participant on the phone call. When it is time to vote, I will say, participant 1, if you are voting yes, press *9 now. Participant 1, if you are voting no, press *9 now. Participant 1, if you are abstaining, press *9 now.
Paul and Lloyd, I think we only have 1 person to vote by phone because Joanne Hills has a computer that she can vote on the polls. She just is using the phone for audio, I believe.
Very good. All right, we'll go to the first motion now. It is moved by Judy Browse and seconded by Stan Hunter that voting privileges be extended to both members and adherents of Bracebridge United Church. Is there any discussion about this motion? If not, then I will ask you to please vote now. And you should be able to see at the top of your screen, participant 1, do you approve that voting privileges be extended to both members and adherents of Bracebridge United Church?
There's just a few more to come in, Paul, so we'll give them another 30 seconds or so.
Very good.
There also was a raised hand of someone that's on the phone. Diane Cheatham.
Correct.
Diane Cheatham, if you can unmute yourself and raise your hand. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Diane, you'd unmute yourself by hitting *6.
You are unmuted. How do I raise my hand?
You raised your hand.
Raise your hand. Okay. The last for voting, the last one for abstaining. What was that for at the very end? What was the word used at the very end of that?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Okay. So I know what that means. That's fine. And I just, even using the phone, I use *9 for voting.
Yes,
Any
correct.
one of the 3 that I choose.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
And Paul, you can, I think we've got all the chat messages. So just, and there's no, either, I don't think there's anybody that has 3 that way. So you just have to pick up the telephone call. Vote.
Very good. So shall we move on to the second motion then?
Well, what you should
need to
do
do
is pick up the telephone vote with the
Yes.
*9 options.
All right, so if you are voting by telephone, then if you're voting yes for this motion, please press *9 now. And I think we have that one telephone vote.
And the motion passed.
Thank you. The second motion is moved by Tony DeLabio and seconded by Susan Montgomery to approve the minutes of the annual congregational meeting of March 1st, 2020 as presented. Is there any discussion about this particular motion? There being none, could I ask you to please vote now? And if you are voting by telephone now, and you wish to vote yes, please press *9 now.
Diane Cheatham, you have your hand up again. Have you got another question? Unmute yourself and ask your question.
I wonder if the hand goes up, Judy, when she votes.
Maybe.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
That's
fine.
the vote. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the vote.
Okay.
And I didn't get the votes in from the co-hosts yet, but other than that, it won't make any difference. The motion has passed.
Lloyd, we sent you ours. Did you not get it?
Not for this one.
Okay.
Lloyd, it's Martha. I sent you mine. Did you get it?
Yeah, Noonan sent theirs too. By chat.
Okay, while you're sorting that out, we'll move to business arising.
So you, okay. Nope.
Under business
Nope.
arising.
We missed a vote, did we not?
I'm sorry, we did. I'm just so eager, I jumped ahead. The third motion is moved by Martha Wood and seconded by Linda Acton-Riddle to approve the minutes of the congregational meeting of June 28th, 2020 as presented. Is there any discussion on this particular motion? There being none, I will ask you to vote now. And Diane, for your telephone vote, if you approve, please press *9 now. And I see that you have voted already.
And I did get the chat messages, and the motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Now we will move on to business arising. Under business arising, I'd like to introduce Bev Webb with a brief report from the search team.
Thank you, Paul. The minutes that you just approved, you will notice that we reported last year we were well into the search process, and we were hoping that we would have a recommendation to the congregation in the spring of 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and we had some challenges navigating through the approval process and selection process during the pandemic. But in June, with the minutes that you just approved again, we called Reverend Kathleen Taylor to join Bracebridge United Church as our second minister. Kathleen joined us on October 1st, and right now we are looking forward to Kathleen's covenanting service that we are in the process of planning. And we have decided that we're hopeful to hold that service this spring, safely, together, and outside. So more details are to come, but we are all looking forward to the spring and Kathleen's covenanting service with Bracebridge United Church. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Bev. And I'd like to now call upon Reverend Nancy and Reverend Kathleen.
Thank you. Every year, it's hard as we watch as beloved members of our congregation, our loved ones are no longer with us. And every year we struggle with the missing faces in our congregation. And yet they are only missing from our congregation. They are not missing from our hearts, and they continue on. I'd like to share this piece of scripture with you from John chapter 14, verses 1 through 4. Jesus said, "Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I go to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, you will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going."
I'm going to read the names of those members of our faith community that we have recognized and honored this year in memoriam. Some of these are names you will know well. Others are names that you might have only heard of. We've lost many loved, beloved members of our congregation this year. It's been a hard year, and it's been made even more difficult because for many of these folks, we were not able to gather in our traditional way to say our farewell and to give thanks for their life among us. The people we are remembering from the year 2020 are Thomas Jones, Jean LaRose, Anna Harper, Bill Towns, Ginny Kernahan, Ruth Lodge, Bruce Murchison, Audrey Daynard, Dorothy Boyer, Irma Coyne, Jim Hartle, Doug Fryer, Jim Smith, Marion Fraser, Louise Bowes.
I invite you to lift your hearts together to God in prayer with me. Let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks for all of the ways that the people whose names we have shared touched our hearts, whether they are simply a name on a page to us or someone that was a dear and special part of our lives. We give you thanks for them, for all of the individual ways that they made a difference in the world around them and in our Bracebridge United Church family. We ask that everything that was wonderful and wise and funny and smart about all of these people will be remembered by those that love them, that their contributions to our church family will be remembered, that their dedication to the ministry of our church will be an inspiration to those of us that are still here. We ask that for those of us that are still actively grieving all of these deaths, that you would be with us, that you would hold us in your heart and in your hand, that you would guide us, that you would help others comfort us as we continue to grieve. We ask God for the knowledge that they are with you, that they are cherished, and that they still live on in a way that is different for us, different from us that are here on earth. Help us to remember that they are always with us, that the love we shared with them continues on, and that we are never alone because we and they are united in your love. We ask your blessing upon all of us. We give you thanks for their lives. We lift them up to you in our hearts and in our prayers. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Kathleen and Reverend Nancy. Before I ask Carolyn Gravel to present the financial statements, I'd like to point out one omission in the annual report this year, and that was that Mary Ruth Roadhouse was inadvertently omitted from being on the Congregational Committee, which she is. The lifeblood of our church community are the many, many volunteers who contribute so much to our church and to our community. I'd like to name them all, but I can't do that. But I would like to certainly mention the names of our executive council, some of whom sadly are stepping down this year. There's our secretary, Leanne Lamoureux, the chair of Congregational Life, Judy Browse, the chair of Growing in Faith, Tony DeLabio, the chair of Worship, Stan Hunter, the chair of Managing Our Money, Lloyd Dunham, the chair of Property, Ben Hopkins, the chair of Personnel and People, Ann Noonan, the representatives for Shining Waters, Wendy White and Martha Wood, the chair of Nominations, Susan Montgomery, and of course now, finally, Carolyn Gravel, our treasurer, whom I'll call upon to give her report.
Thank you. This is certainly a different way of connecting. I think as I was logging on, I lost my video connection, so I hope that doesn't happen during this. Lloyd is going to share on screen some of the pages of the financial statements that I will speak to. Just before I get started in talking about the numbers, I'm just going to take a moment to reflect on something that Kathleen said during the online service for this week. And she shared that the AGM is an opportunity to look back on what we've done, and also an opportunity to look ahead at how we will contribute or how we will continue to deliver our ministry into the future. And that resonated with me on a lot of levels, and it resonated relative to the financial statements as well. Because indeed, we will take some time this afternoon to look at where we have been. And in that, we will look at our 2020 actual financial results. And then we'll look ahead as to how we contribute to deliver our ministry going forward. And we'll do that in the form of our 2021 budget. When we get to talk about the budget, I will be turning the speaking part of this part of the meeting over to Lloyd. So I'm going to walk you through the 2020 actual results, and Lloyd will take you through the 2021 budget. So with that, I asked Lloyd to make sure that the first screen that we shared during this presentation to be the statement of operations for our general fund. And just before I talk about this in some of the line details, I'm just going to ask Lloyd to scroll to the bottom of this screen, because of course, everybody always wants to know, how did we end the year? And I'm sure that many of you have already looked ahead to your reports and have seen that we ended the year with a $21,000 deficit for the year. It was $21,094. If we look across the column to the right of that, we see that indeed we had budgeted a $43,000 deficit for the year. So our deficit indeed was less than we had budgeted. So knowing that our deficit was $21,000 for the year, I'm just going to ask Lloyd to scroll back up to the top so that we can start to look at some of these numbers as to what contributed to our deficit for the year. And I'm just going to review a few of the revenue lines at first. So we can see that our envelopes and loose givings for the year was just over $238,000. And if we look at two columns over from that, we can see that in 2019, it was just under 232,000. So indeed, we saw an increase in our envelopes and giving in 2020 of about $6,500. The next line on there that I want to draw your attention to is our building use. And we can see that our building use for 2020 was $15,755. This was less than we had budgeted at $21,000 and significantly less than we had received in the year previous at $25,178. So this line, the revenues that we received for the use of our building was about $9,500 less than the previous year, and about $5,500 less than we had budgeted. Another line that is significantly less than 2019 was our fundraising revenue, and I don't think that'll come as any surprise to anybody. With our building being closed and our need to physically distance, we weren't able to get together in many of the ways that we do that generates our fundraising revenue during the course of the year. I think that those who lead our Christmas marketplace fundraiser did a great job, and indeed much of our fundraising revenue of $7,576 for 2020 was the result of that. But again, it's less than the 25,000 we had budgeted, and it's less than the 26,730 that we had received in 2019. The next line on here is miscellaneous revenues, and that's a $4,516. And most of that revenue is a recovery that Bracebridge United Church was eligible for through our payroll and the government's support of a rebate of a portion of the payroll remittance taxes that we pay during the year. And this was available to many businesses across Canada in 2020 as a result of the pandemic and some of the relief that the government was providing for that. So that was a new revenue for us that contributed to our general fund this past year. And of course, you can see the $100 that we receive annually from our Williams Trust. Our total revenues were $266,357. And we can see that that's down significantly from our budgeted revenues of $291,100 and down from our revenues of 2019 of just over $284,000. And Lloyd, I'm going to move on to talk about the expenses. And I'm sure many of you will be happy to hear I'm not going to talk about all of the expenses on a line-by-line basis, as I did with the revenues. I'm going to talk a lot about these in more some general terms. And if we look at our total expense line, our total expenses were $289,266. So not only were our revenues down from our budget and down from the, well, not only were they down from our budget, the revenues down from our budget, but our expenses were also down by our budget. And we can see that they were down from our budget by about $43,000. And essentially, they're down in almost every line item except for our office and general expenses, where some of our costs to host our services online were absorbed into that office and general line. So our committee expenses are growing in faith, worship, faith in action, congregational life, and personnel and people. They were all down over what we had budgeted. And again, that'll be no surprise, as we all had to physically distance. Our church was closed. Our typical programs were not running as they were able to. Our salaries and benefits line, our actual expense was $207,153, and that's down from our budget of $236,635. And as the was already discussed at this annual general meeting, our recruitment for our new full-time minister occurred later than we had planned, and our budget had actually planned for that new minister, for Kathleen, to be with us for 6 months of the year, when indeed she was with us for 3 months of the year. So there were some savings in that expense. So our deficit, before we consider our capital items, was just under $23,000. It was $22,869. We had some capital expenses, although again, it was less than we had budgeted and less than we had incurred the previous year. Our capital expenses were $4,393. And essentially, we bought some new computer equipment, we bought some newer office furniture, and we readied an office for a new occupant during 2020. A couple of lines below the capital expenses, we see an inter-fund transfer of $6,168, and this is additional revenue to our general fund, and it comes from our designated funds. It comes from our Manse Fund and our Special Gifts and Bequests Fund, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that essentially is funds transferred in from those two funds to contribute to our general fund expenses. After all of that, that's where we end up with our deficit for the year of just over $21,000. We have been carrying forward an accumulated deficit from previous years of $25,630, bringing our accumulated deficit at the end of December 2020 to $46,724. I'm just going to pause here for a minute to see if there are any questions that anybody has about the general fund before I go on and talk about the designated funds. And I can't currently see hands that are raised. I'm wondering if somebody's monitoring those
Carol, and I'm monitoring it, and there are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Judy. So Lloyd's going to move on. If you're following along in your copy of the annual general report, we're going to be talking about page 37. And 37 is our statement of operations for our designated funds, and it's the detailed statement of operations. And in here, we have three different categories. We have our Manse Fund, we have our Special Gifts and Bequest Fund, and then we have a number of other smaller funds, our Memorial Fund, our Church Maintenance Fund, our Benevolent Fund, Out of the Cold, and the last column before the total is a number of other smaller and less often used funds. So I'm just going to ask Lloyd to scroll a little bit closer to the bottom of this page. Thank you, Lloyd. I'm thinking I probably need a Lloyd at work so that when I'm on my Zoom meetings and doing presentations, he's moving those slides along. But a big shout out to Lloyd for doing this for me. So if we look at the bottom row of numbers across that page, we see what the fund balances were in each of the funds identified at the end of the fiscal year. So those numbers are bolded across the bottom of the page. The row of numbers just above those are what we started the year in those funds at. So we started the Manse Fund at the beginning of the year at $343,338, and we ended the year at $351,060. So the activity throughout the rest of the page tells us how the fund got from where it started at the beginning of the year to where it ended at the end of the fiscal year. And the first thing, of course, that changes those lines are the revenues, the donations and fundraising, and or the investment income that is received during the year 2020. The section following that are the expenses, and we break out our expenses certainly for the Manse and the Special Gifts Fund. We provide what the investment administration fees were. And then for the rest of the fund, it's either the fund activity or the assets that were acquired out of those funds during the fiscal year. The next section provides the excess of the revenues or expenses. And then we have the inter-fund transfers. And you can see the inter-fund transfers in brackets underneath the Manse and underneath the Special Gifts and Bequests Fund. And that's those funds that went to contribute to our general fund. So those two amounts add up to $6,168, which is the same that was received into the general fund. We can see our memorial donations were just over $4,700. As was suggested earlier in the meeting, we lost a number of members of our congregation, and certainly the memorial fund in part reflects our loss of those members of our congregation. And the memorial fund had an asset acquisition of $750 during the year, which was the acquiring of the rolling bookshelf for our children's library. The church maintenance fund, as has been typical the last number of years, there were only modest contributions to that. Quite some time ago, we used to have that as a line item on our envelopes for giving. And when that fund had a larger amount of money in it, we had temporarily removed that line from the envelope givings to encourage more contributions to our general fund and to M&S. We do still receive some modest contributions, and that's reflected there. And the fund activity of $8,900 is the fund activity for the year and includes such things as snow removal, elevator maintenance, fire extinguisher checks, and the annual maintenance on our alarm monitoring, as well as some repairs and maintenance that went on in the church. The balance in that fund, in our church maintenance fund, to the end of December 2020 was $28,910. And if you refer to the first asterisk footnote, you'll see that there was still a balance of $25,504 of that balance that was for the roof fund. And if we took that amount away from that church maintenance column, then the amount specific to the church maintenance fund would be just over $3,400. The next column is our Benevolent Fund. We had received donations of $750 to that fund, and we paid out $1,000 in requests for need to that. The next column is our Out of the Cold column with donations, fundraising, and revenue of $27,404. In that amount was also funding that we had received from the District of Muskoka to help contribute to the ministry of that program during the year 2020 and the additional need and challenges as a result of the pandemic. The next column is our Other column, and it shows revenues of just under $12,000, $11,970. Of that, we had received $10,000 from the District of Muskoka to support additional and needs within our community for people suffering challenges, again, because of the pandemic. And the fund activity of $9,819, most of that is the payout of the funding that we had received from the District of Muskoka. And there was just a small balance that was carried forward into the new year. So that's what I have to share about the designated funds. And you can see in the far right-hand column is the total column, and that total column carries forward to page 36, which we won't be showing on the screen, but that's the page 36 is our statement of operations for the designated funds, but at a consolidated, not at the detail level. So again, I've been talking for some time. I'm just going to pause a bit and somebody can let me know if there are any questions. I asked Lloyd.
Bev,
No question.
Bev Webb, if you can lower your or unmute yourself and you want to speak.
I just have a quick question, Carolyn, about your note 4 to the financial statements. The $60,000 that we received from the government under CEBA. I'm just curious, how come the $20,000 doesn't get recognized in our income until 2022?
So that's a very good question, Beverly, and thank you for asking that. I think that deserves some mention at this meeting. And for those of you who have your annual report with you, if you refer to page 34, you can see on our statement of financial position that we have recognized $40,000 as the Canadian Emergency Business Account loan payable. And although we weren't sharing this on screen, I had planned to make sure that we mentioned this. So again, the government made available different opportunities for small businesses, including charitable organizations, to take advantage of a loan. And in 2020, Bracebridge United Church took advantage of 40,000 of that loan that was made available. The government did increase the amount available to organizations up to $60,000, but it happened later in the year. Bracebridge United Church applied for that increase in early December, and we received approval in January. So the amount of that loan payable has increased since the reporting date of these financial statements to 60,000 from the 40,000 that's reflected here. Bev asked about the forgivable portion of that loan. And on the 40,000 that is reflected on the financial statements to the end of December, 10,000 of that amount is forgivable, which means Bracebridge United Church will not have to pay back the full 40,000, and that they'll only have to pay back $30,000 if indeed we repay that loan prior to December 31st, 2022. So we have just about 2 more years to pay that loan back. In fact, as I suggested, we've increased that loan to 60,000 in January. And of that additional 20,000 that we increased the loan by, an additional $10,000 is forgivable. So out of the total $60,000 loan, if we pay back $40,000 by December 31st, 2022, $20,000 of it will be forgivable. And we'll only pay back 40,000 out of the 60. So Bev, Lloyd and I had some conversations about when we would recognize that revenue. And indeed, there were some discussions at the United Church of Canada level about when congregations would or could recognize that revenue. I also did some looking on Canada Revenue Agency's website, and organizations have the option of either recognizing that revenue in the year that the loan is received or in the year that the loan is paid back. And the conversations that we had were such that we felt that the revenue would be earned when we met the requirements of paying back the loan. So when we pay back the 40,000, we will indeed have earned the $20,000 forgiveness. And we chose to recognize the revenue when we pay that back. I don't imagine it to be the case, but if we don't pay back the 40,000 by December 31st of 2022, then indeed we'll have to pay back the full 60,000, and the $20,000 revenue would not have been earned. So that's why we haven't recognized it. I know it was a very long explanation, but I hope it answers your question, Bev.
Thank you, Carolyn. It does make sense because you're right if we don't pay it. that 40 back. We won't get the 20, but I think it's a nice, comfortable thing to mention that, you know, the church did receive $20,000 that if we honor our commitment, will bring that deficit down to $1,000. So, you know, I think we're sitting in a nice, fairly nice place. That's just my comment. So thank you for getting us to that nice place.
Thank you. And I like how you've drawn reference to when we recognize that $20,000 worth of forgiveness as our revenue, it indeed has a different impact on our 2020 deficit. And it would be applied at that point against our accumulated deficit. I've also asked for us to share a little bit relative to the notes on page 39. And if I could just ask Lloyd to scroll a little bit. I think that we would be remiss in talking about our financial statements and our financial results for 2020 if we didn't mention what this congregation, what the Bracebridge United Church contributed, not just to our church, but here's what we've contributed to the United Church of Canada Mission and Service Fund. Our contributions were just under $50,000 as a congregation, and with our memorial gifts. Our contributions were $49,761. Our goal was $60,000, which is similar to what our goal was for 2019. And if you look at what we contributed in 2020 compared to 2019, our contributions were just about $4,500 less than the previous year. So given all of the other challenges, I think that this congregation did a great job in contributing to the needs outside of our own church. We also had some contributions for other organizations and fundraising events. If I remember correctly, we had one communion offering, a communion that we held early in the year before the pandemic hit and our church doors closed. And that raised $1,009 to the Muskoka Indigenous Friendship Center. And we also had some contributions later in the year for Andy's House and a contribution as well to the Ronnie Fund. So in addition to giving to our general fund and our designated funds, we also found ways to contribute outside of our church congregation needs. That's everything that I had planned to share relative to our actual results for 2020. And again, I'll just pause to see if there are any questions in general about the actual financial results. And
I don't see any, Carolyn.
Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Lloyd, who's going to talk for us how our finances play a part in how we're looking ahead about how we're contributing to our ministry going forward. Thank you, everyone.
I still have a little breathing time. I think Paul's got a motion he's going to look after first.
Thank you very much, Lloyd, and thank you very much, Carolyn, for that very detailed, very comprehensive explanation of our finances. So we'll move ahead to, before Lloyd actually presents the budget, we'll move to our next motion. Moved by Carolyn Gravel and seconded by Susan Montgomery to approve all reports and the financial statements as presented in the 2020 annual report. I'm assuming that there is no further discussion on this. Then I will ask you to please vote on this motion now. And for our telephone voter, do you approve all reports in the financial statements as presented in the 2020 annual report? If the answer is yes, please press *9 now.
Well, Paul, pretty well everybody has voted, and with a couple of abstentions, but only a couple, we actually have no votes. Everybody voted yes. So Carolyn, well done.
Thank you very much. All right. We'll now move on to...
Paul, just before we move on, if the telephone person wanted to vote no, I think you have to give her a chance to vote no now.
I'm sorry, yes. So Diane, if I didn't see your hand earlier, if you wish to vote no to this motion, could you please press *9 now?
Or give her the option to vote yes with *9.
Well, we did that.
Sorry.
Is Diane muted?
She might want to unmute and tell us what her vote is.
Oh, yes, Diane, you're actually muted. So could you please press *6 to unmute yourself? Oh, and Diane is back in. So Diane, Diane Cheatham, if you wish to vote yes, please press *9 now. Diane, if you wish to give us a verbal vote, could you please press *6 now to unmute yourself?
I think it'd be fair to move along, Paul.
Yes, I think so. Okay. Very good. So next then is I'll ask Lloyd to present the 2021 budget.
And just give me 1 second. I've just got to get myself unmuted. Okay, so I've got a few slides to go through, and can everybody hear me okay? That's working? Yeah, okay, I got nods, that's good. Carolyn got to report the actual results. I have fewer detailed decimal numbers, mine are more rounded. So let us begin. And to begin with, if you're looking at your annual reports, we're going to page 35 of the annual report, which is the statement of operations and changes for the general fund. And let's go straight to the bottom line. What I have circled here on the screen, we're showing a deficit for the coming year of just over $78,000 before funds from the investment funds, which would bring it down to $69,000. So how did we get there, and how does this budget come together? Well, let's start and go to the expenses first. First two items that I'll draw your attention to are United Church of Canada expenses. As per their recommendation, the salaries and benefits for our ministry team have been increased by 2.2% for the year. That's the recommendation that came from them. We also have received our assessment fee, which used to be called presbytery dues, and the United Church has raised that by 7.2%. That's based on a formula from prior years' income, our revenues, and that and costs. And anyway, they've taken upon themselves to raise it by 7.2%, and that's kind of non-bargainable. So it is what it is. Moving on to things that we can control somewhat better. Looking at the faith resources, which is essentially the purview of the property area. Again, you'll notice that the budgeted amounts for the year for janitorial services, heat, insurance, and water are very much in line with budgets from prior years, and in fact, in some cases, show a reduction, a little bit of a reduction. The one that I've got highlighted in sort of a brownie color, if it comes out on your screens that way, is the church maintenance. As Carolyn pointed out, that you found that budgeted and detailed expenses for that in the designated funds in prior years. Starting with 2021, we've moved that back into the general fund, and by back into it, that's where it was, I guess, sometime prior to about 2005. And we're back there again. So we've had to budget for those church maintenance activities that Carolyn had mentioned, the snow removal, the elevators, the going to be electric coming in, the plumbing, people like that. Anyway, that's budgeted back in the general fund. Generally, we don't spend that much money, but I've had a conversation with Ben, and he feels that we probably should leave that there as a placeholder for that. So it's a big kick to our 2021 budget in that area. The other area of our expenses is are the committees, and I'm happy to say that again, we're looking at not a full year of congregational activity in 2021. We know that already, and all of the committees have looked at their budgets and come back and trim their budgets to reflect a shorter period and a closed church facility. The one thing that you should note there as you look at the 2020 actuals is that the committees generally spend a lot less than what they budgeted, but that's where we are. So altogether, our expenses for the year are at $360,000, the pinky color at the bottom of the screen. And that's up roughly $71,000 from the prior year. That's $71,000 from the prior year actual. It's up $27,000 from the prior year budget. So moving on to the revenue side, there's really three main areas that we talk about here. On the fundraising side, we have budgeted $22,000. That is based on a conversation I had with Bev Webb, and our hope and our intent is to have two marketplaces in 2021, one in the spring and one in the more traditional time closer to Christmas. So the hope is there, and I hope that our COVID color coding in this area continues to move down the scale, and that we will be able to have that spring marketplace that's important for that fundraising line. The second area, and this is a more ambitious target, is the building use number of 15,000. The building, as you know, is closed with the exception of a couple of groups at present. So that looks like an ambitious number. However, if you look at 2020, we actually did exceed the 15,000, and that was based on a year of about 2.5 months of being wide open and 9.5 months of being in mostly lockdown state. So my hope is that we'll at least see that in reverse. We may be locked down for the first 9 months, but we should be open for the last 3 and maybe even 4. And if the vaccines come quick, maybe even more than that. So it is an ambitious target. I can't today tell you that we've got renters lined up for that building use for the 15,000, but I've included that in the budget. And then the big number, which is the envelopes in loose. And before I talk about future projections, I want to echo probably everyone's thanks to everybody in the congregation that has done such a great job of financially supporting the church in 2020. I'm on conference calls with United Church of Canada, and there are lots of churches that the offerings dried up, and when they're talking about, we're talking about CEBA loans, they're talking about records of employment for their staff. So it's been amazing that everybody has come through the way they did, and actually exceeded the 2019 actual, and that's an envelopes and loose number. So as you know, in 2019 there was a lot more loose because there were church services. So the 2020 is almost entirely envelope, par, and other contributions, and it's been quite amazing. As the number in the green over the side indicates, the number was actually up 2.8% year over year, and applying that same 2.8% year over year going into 2021, it brings us to that $245,000 budget number, which is the same as last year. I think that's a decent number for the budget. It's always a bit of a guess as to what that should be, but I think that one works. Just before we move on to some other items, I did want to, like Carolyn, talk a little bit about the designated funds, the detail around those. We do budget in those areas a little bit. We don't try and budget how much money is coming in from memorials or how much money is coming into the Benevolent Fund or items like that. So I did want to point out that in this area, the items in blue and the brown color again reflect our expectations for our two investment funds at RBC, the Manse Fund and the Special Gifts and Bequests Fund. If you look to the right-hand side, the two together, we're looking at an income of $19,000, associated administrative fees, and based on the income from the Manse Fund coming to the general fund, and approximately 50% of the income from the special gifts coming to the general fund, that provides a $9,000 transfer to the general fund. I also, in the brown below, did highlight we also continue to see unrealized gains and losses, and even last year when we had the market upset in March and April of last year, it recovered, and we had a small gain there. looking at trade numbers and things like that, and then vaccines coming. I'm hopeful that we don't see another market downturn like that, and we'll have a steadier gains on our portfolio going into the next year. So. Two other items in the detail that I did want to bring to your attention is that what used to be called on in your annual report the maintenance fund. In that column now it's the church building fund, where as people are starting to make contributions to that either through envelopes or PAR or other gifts. So we've budgeted in there for about 8,000 this year. And Ben again has identified items of a capital nature for 8,500 that we budgeted for in there as well. So that is where that fund is. And as Carolyn had pointed out earlier, although it shows a $28,000 value, most of that has been already earmarked for the roof campaign. So when you bring these together, as Carolyn had referenced earlier with the summary, you'll also see in here, and I've highlighted in green below. And this is the one of the points that I wanted to make today, is that yes, the general fund has had a deficit last year. We're budgeting a big deficit in the coming year. But if you look at the other funds, and this is 2019, 2020 actual, and then 2021, you'll see that our designated funds, the surplus at the end of the year continues to grow. Maybe not by leaps and bounds, but it's been growing, and it's been doing that for quite a few years. So when you put that all together, you end up in a in a sort of a more blended position. I'll show a slide to that in a few minutes. However, with the good news there, we're still back to here. An operating deficit for the year of in the general fund of almost 70,000, accumulated with the deficits, the accumulated deficit added into that, we're up over $116,000, and that's a lot, and it's not a sustainable position for us to be in. However, I think we do need to. I pulled up some history just so that we put things into a little bit of perspective, if you will. This is an extension, if you will, of that designated funds and adding the other funds in it. So really our statement of financial position. And if you look, I've gone all the way back to 2015 and brought those numbers forward, summarized in some cases there, some areas, but here we are. And at the bottom, right at the bottom line in the red and the black, you'll see that each year, and this includes the general fund and all of our other funds, each year that overall total available funds to us has, we've had a few years in the red, but a couple of years in the black. It's bounced around, but up till this year, we've been pretty steady state around that between $650,000 and $700,000 all through there, very for available funds. This number would look better, but it's reduced by the values of our loans. So the actual funds available to us, we're still up with our projected deficit. We would still be at around just under $600,000 in available funds. So when we set out to return our ministerial staff to its full complement, in that we consciously knew that in the short term we would have to to draw into some of these other funds, but and here we are. But in total, when you look at all the funds together, it's not as dire as it looks like just when you look at the general fund all by itself. The other thing I did just as a point of reference was if you look at, we're back to the general fund statement, but I draw your attention to the two rightmost columns. That isn't 2019, that's 2016. Both our budget and our actual. And if you look, there's the difference in our envelopes and loose during that period of time, where we've dropped, but not as much as what we might think. The other part I found very interesting was the faith resource, the property-related expenses. If you look here, again, with the exception of church maintenance, which we've had to add into our budget, our costs have actually gone down in areas like heat and electricity, and in janitorial services and supplies, and only slightly up on the insurance and water area. Also intriguing is the green line there, salaries and benefits. If you look in 2016, our expenditures, our actual, which is the one on the far right, was $252,000 for 2016. We've budgeted $252,000 for 2021. We're right back to 2016 all over again. And also a little further down, the assessment fee and presbytery dues, though I rail on about them increasing it by 7%, gee, we're still less than we were in 2016. So I guess I can't get too upset about that either. But the point of that is that I think that we have been here before. Also, I went back to the 2015 in terms of households, and just for your information, here are the envelopes, and the offering amounts as per the tax receipts of this year. So this is all offerings. This is for any contribution to the church that's receivable. As you can see, the number of envelope givers is down by a little bit, about 14, steady with the par, and then other methods we're down a fair bit there. However, if you look at the actual dollar amounts, the 60 that are in miscellaneous and Canada Helps exclusively, it's about $7,000. The other point I'd like to make is that we have used Canada Helps this year, and it's been quite successful. We've received a lot more money than the $29.73. That number is for people who weren't already identified either as PAR contributors or envelope contributors in our church database. So in total, during 2020, we actually received Canada Helps donations of just under $13,000, which was very helpful. And also digging into history, I found this, excuse me, quote, and it was from actually Don McKay. He wrote back in 2015, "We will continue to monitor and report on the financial effects of our ministry in our area and beyond. We are mindful of the intangible effect of spending funds we sometimes do not feel we have. But that is faith, and by faith we shall continue to guide the finances of your church." He also says a big thank you to on our and your behalf to Carolyn Gravel for her dedication to keeping the finances in order at BUC. And when I read that, I didn't think I could write anything any better. And so I thought I've stolen it and used it in 2021. It is scary sometimes when you think you're spending money that isn't there. But on the other hand, we look at it and we're trying to seed the ministry of this church and going forward. And we're back. That's all I have. I'm ready to take questions, comments, suggestions. Jim and Bev Webb have, Bev or Jim have their hand raised. I guess if they unmute themselves, I can take the question.
It's not Jim. Jim's given up. He's left me.
Ah.
I have a couple of questions or maybe comments. I think we need to have more faith in our rental income. We've got lots of faith in fundraising. And I think that given that all during COVID, we made $15,700 on rent in 2020, I think we need to, quite frankly, I think we need to budget $20,000 for rent, because I think there are going to be opportunities for people to encourage renters as things improve during the year. The other thing I'm wondering if you can consider, or if we can consider, is the interfund transfer. Is there any way that we could bring all of our investment income into operating? I know in a previous church I was part of, our restricted funds earned income, but all income came into operating for use, and the restricted funds maintained the same amount that was contributed. So that's the only other thing that I was thinking, that we could become a little more, we could produce a little bit more revenue if we were more hopeful and more maybe pursuing some more rental opportunities, and if we transferred all of our rental or all of our investment income into the operating fund. That's just my comments, Lloyd. I don't know if I'm proposing a motion to amend the budget, but I bring that forward.
Yeah, I respond, I guess, firstly to your rentals, Bev, looking at it and then doing the comparative to the last year where we were open for a little while and closed for a long while. The benefit of that is that there was still some sort of trickle effect as things wound down in the spring. I don't see that reverse trickle or that increase. So we don't know when the church facility will be open again, and we don't have renters already lined up. Even the existing renters haven't all said, well, the day you're open, we're all going to be back. But that's going to be a new task as well. So I hear you. I hope you're right, but I would be reluctant to change that number. Then on the second, your second point is that we are governed by the investment policy statement, which was approved several years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I'm thinking. And those are the rules and dictates there. So that would have to go back to that committee, and they'd have to revise what they were thinking. Nancy Wilson has her hand raised.
Perhaps a naive question. You've shown the 60,000 loan as available money. Is there anywhere on these statements that you show that we actually owe the government 40,000 back?
Well, no, because yeah, let me just flip back through here. One more, I think. There we go. Yeah, so if this slide's still up, and I hope it is, you can see it. So we showed the 40,000 at the end of 2020 and the 60,000. So that's what we owe back. That's our, as you see there, that's a liability that we owe to the government. The reality is that if we meet the payment terms, we will be forgiven, as Carolyn mentioned, up to 20,000 of that. So that's where it shows, and I guess the other place where that shows is at the bottom of this chart down where it's in the red there, the 74,000. That's because that money that's reduced. That 74,000 reflects that 60,000 isn't available to us. That it's part of the payback, the loan. So we so for budgeting purposes, we include the full amount of the loan.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Madam, you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Thanks. Sorry, to build on that question from the previous speaker, I would presume that the 60,000 is sitting in some kind of an account earning some interest, because we're not spending that 40,000. We are saving it to pay back. I presume that's what we've done. I would ask, is the interest income or the growth on that 60,000 during the 2021 year all going into income? And if so, would we have more than the 9,000 that is budgeted for from that?
Well, the answer to your question is that, I mean, the actual monies that the BUC has are in about 4 different places. 2 of them are the Mance Fund and the Special Guest Funds at RBC Investments. And then the other 2 places are in RBC bank accounts that Carolyn manages to make sure that we've got enough float to make all our payroll and other costs on a month-by-month basis. So they're blended that way. And the monies that are in the investment funds are mostly Mance Fund and Special Guests, but there are some funds that we've left there. We have not, although we've reported the drawdown, that there's still some funds that are in there that are general fund related because we haven't needed them yet. And so they are there earning investment. So it's a long roundabout way of saying that I couldn't go and find you a $60,000 bill and say it's in this particular account. But between the 4 accounts, the monies that we don't need for float for the year are invested, and any interest on that, along with the investment accounts, does go straight into the general fund for sure. Hope that worked.
Are there any further questions? Oh, thank you, Barb. We will now move on to the motion. The motion is moved by Lloyd Dunham and seconded by Judy Browse to approve the 2021 budget as presented by the Chair of Managing Our Money. And is there any further discussion? Oh, we have one question.
Can 705-645-1641-0485 unmute themselves and ask their question?
To unmute, please press *6.
Diane, I assume that's you. Can you unmute yourself? Okay. Have you got a question? I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. You have a question? You're muted again. So I'm going to lower your hand. There don't seem to be any other questions.
No. All right, then if there are no other questions, then we will now put that to the vote. And can we have that pop-up poll? I'll read the motion again, moved by Lloyd Dunham and seconded by Judy Browse to approve the 2021 budget as presented by the Chair of Managing Our Money.
And Paul, I believe that the polling is, yeah, it's just about done now. We've got a couple of abstains again, a few, about 5 abstains, and everybody else voted yes, no no's for the budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent job, both Lloyd and Carolyn. So we'll now move on to, and I'd like to introduce Susan Montgomery to offer appreciation and thanks to the retiring committee members. Susan. You'll need to unmute yourself, Susan.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm finally unmuted.
You are.
It's been my pleasure to serve as chair of the nominating committee for the previous year. The poet Khalil Gibran wrote, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It's when you give of yourself that you truly give." Bracebridge United Church is blessed with many who live by this mantra. We have been served by the generosity of the following retiring committee members and express our sincere gratitude for their service. Leanne Lamoureux is retiring from Executive Council, Recording Secretary. Martha Wood and Judy Browse are retiring from Congregational Life Committee. Elaine Mason from Faith in Action. Tony DeLabio and Tish Bonney from Growing in Faith. I am retiring from the Nominations Committee. From Personnel and People, Marion Dunham. Ann Noonan is stepping down as chair but remaining on the committee. Ben Hopkins stepping down as chair of Property but remaining on the committee. And David Kent is retiring from the Worship Committee. So we sincerely thank all those people for their years of service. I present the following new committee members. For Executive Council, Pat Salter as Recording Secretary. On the Congregational Life Committee, Kathy Smith, Pat Best. For Faith in Action, Jane Cohey, Sharon Wilson, and Janice Broadworth. On Growing in Faith, Ellen Yo and Martha Wood. For nominations, Dennis Noonan will be moving to chair, and Sandra Hartle is a new member. Property, Terry Killens is moving to chair. And on the Worship Committee, Bob Joint is joining that committee. I would also like to express my thanks on behalf of all of us. Very special thanks to those who've committed all the tech support to bring your AGM to you today. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much, Susan, and I concur with your congratulations to all the new members, and a sincere thank you to those who are now taking a well-deserved rest. So the motion is moved by Susan Montgomery and seconded by Stan Hunter to approve the new committee members as presented. And is there any discussion about this particular motion?
Yes, there is. I don't think I'm retiring from congregational life, although maybe somebody's trying to tell me something. It's Judy Browse.
Oh, sorry. You can stay.
Are you trying to get rid of me, Susan?
I don't know where I got that from. I jotted it down there and I'll just cross it right out. So
it's not on the screen, but it sure shocked me when I heard it.
What we will express is our appreciation for you staying on that committee.
You're welcome.
If there's thank goodness that's settled. So, all right, if there's no further discussion, then the poll can now begin. And on your screen, it should say participant 1, do you approve the new committee members as presented? And Diane, if you're on the phone, you can press *9 now for yes.
And that motion's passed very easily. No no's there either, Paul.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. We'll move on now to other business. Is there any other business coming from the floor, or should I say from the screen? I don't see any questions or hands. So I'd like to move on to our thank you. And there you see the wonderful smiling faces of our ministry team. So I'd just like to say that 2020 has been an incredibly challenging year, but through it all, our ministry team has just been fantastic. And they, with grace, ingenuity, diligence, and compassion, have really inspired us, given us some wonderful, wonderful virtual services, lots of inspiration, and led us through this really difficult time in our history. So, a heartfelt thanks from me and the entire Executive Council to Nancy, Kathleen, Mary Ruth, and Jen. Thank you ever so much. And you'll be getting your gifts later. Now I'd like to call upon Kathleen to offer a closing prayer. Kathleen.
Thank you, Paul. I'd just like to say before, on behalf of everyone on the meeting, to those that did all of the organizing and the work behind the scenes, you know who you are. Thank you so very much. A tremendous amount of work has gone into making today possible, and we can see that through the quality of the PowerPoint, the polls, and the smoothness with which this meeting has unfolded. So thank you, everyone. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Gracious God, what a lot we have learned today as we have reviewed the finances and over the past couple of days have read of the work of our church in the last year. We thank you for all those who have worked so hard to make the ministry of our church a reality. As we go forward into the next year, we ask that you continue to send your Spirit to inspire us, to enliven us, and to unite us. In whatever shape and format our work will unfold as this year requires of us to do. The changes, the pivots, the challenges, and the joys we will face, we thank you for. We ask that you bless each and every person on this Zoom call and this meeting, in our congregation and in our wider community, with your love and your grace. In your name we ask these things. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Kathleen. And there being no further business, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I think Martha's making that motion, but if not, I will.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it's Martha. I am.
Thank you very much, Martha, and thank you to everyone who has worked so hard to make this meeting a success, and to all of you in our church community. Thank you and good afternoon.